Morning, my name is David Harsh, and I'm a product manager at MicroStrategy in the technology department, responsible for the big data engagements that we have running with customers. So what is MicroStrategy? MicroStrategy is a BI, enterprise analytics and mobility company. So we connect to all data and help you build applications to provide insight to any and every user in your organization. Especially, we're suited for big data technology. Some of the largest companies in the world are also our customers that are all successfully accessing and analyzing into the exabytes of data. And in addition to the massive growth in data that we're seeing, of data volume, a lot of our customers are also excited about the new variety of data that is coming onto the marketplace. And so they're looking for data strategies and application strategies that are going to be resilient in the midst of a very rapidly changing data environment. So here's an agenda slide of what to expect. I'm going to provide a quick introduction into who MicroStrategy is and what do we do. And then it'll be my pleasure to hand it off to Alex Gutau from Cloudera. How many of you all have heard of Cloudera? I'm really excited for this co-presentation with Cloudera because I believe we really offer a strong solution to the market when we work together. And so with that, we partner with Cloudera and ship multiple big data connectors that have been optimized for performance. And I'll let Alex speak to what she wants to talk about.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Alex Gutau, and I'm on the product marketing team at Cloudera. My focus is on our analytic database product. So this includes things like high-performance BI and SQL analytics. One of the most common use cases we see is around this EDW optimization and data mart consolidation within the enterprise, which will be what we focus on a lot today. We'll look at how you actually go about creating what your migration plan is. What are the common steps you go through? How do you actually evaluate how you make this a reality? And then we'll look at some of the new tools and capabilities that we have to help you through this process as well.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So after we're talking about the migration and from an architecture standpoint, I'm going to then talk through the migration from an application standpoint. And I'm going to highlight a few scenarios that we typically encounter with different customers. And so hopefully as I'm explaining some of these scenarios, you'll begin to see how some of these actually fit your use cases and the challenges that you're facing as well. So as the data market is growing in a lot of different directions, so are the demands for new types of enterprise applications. And so MicroStrategy, we've been in the business of developing and working with these applications over the last 30 years. And we've enabled customers to very quickly respond to some of these new demands. There are numerous ways to solve problems with big data technology specifically that were previously cost prohibitive or performance prohibitive. So we find big data applications to be both evolutionary and revolutionary. And what do I mean by that? Evolutionary because it's taking some of your existing applications and evolving those applications to tap into larger amounts of data. And then it's revolutionary because it's encountering net new applications that you've never before discovered because it's tapping into different types of data. So in a data age where a number of data sources is only going to incrementally grow, we at MicroStrategy or Cloudera don't necessarily see this as a challenge as much as an opportunity, the more data points that you have. So the question remains, how can we prepare our organization for the inevitable change that have come with big data? And maybe making light of it a little bit, but getting some insight from Charles Darwin, you see that the animals that are going to survive are not the smartest animals. They're not the most intelligent animals, but they're the animals that are most able to change. So that's what I want to talk about is how can you create an adaptive strategy around this data market that's inevitably going to change. And like I said earlier, we partner with Cloudera, and Alex is going to now talk through what it looks like to optimize your architecture in a way that's both seamless and iterative, how you can get value quick, but then also set yourself up for success in the long term. And then after that, I'm going to describe some of the benefits of using an enterprise BI tool like MicroStrategy, wherever you might see the data end up. And I also hope to use some of that experience that I have with customer stories that I want to share with you all as well. So Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Yeah, so like we mentioned, we're going to go through a few of the motivations, and then more importantly, look at how you can actually bring this back to your business. To begin though, and this slide should not be surprising to anyone in the room, this is taken from some recent ESG research, that more and more enterprises are looking for ways to augment what they're doing with their traditional systems, with their enterprise data warehouses. They are looking at big data platforms such as Hadoop to really be able to augment what they're able to do today, be able to relieve these systems of a lot of the pressures, maybe the CPU cycles done by doing ETL preparation. Many of these customers are looking for ways to better enable a lot of self-service access to their analysts. So they want to be able to open up access to all of this data without putting any of the critical SLA-dependent reports at risk there. And as David was mentioning, they really want to be able to tap into this world of big data. They want to be able to bring in new and changing data sources. They don't want to have to make decisions as to what time period do you keep data for, what types of aggregates do you provide. You have to have access to the full fidelity of data to be able to be adaptive and agile and get new insights from this. So as we see folks embarking on this journey to this changing data warehouse landscape, one of the things we also see is oftentimes it can take a little bit longer than anticipated. So as ESG found, folks are really more in the center of this bell curve where these projects are looking at 9 months to a year to start to see some value from there. And that can make this pretty difficult when you have the demands of maybe your directors, your C-levels saying, hey, we want to cut some costs on these systems. But at the same time, you need to make sure that there's value in these new platforms that you bring in, that these are meaningful for the business and that they're solving real problems. So this means that you have to understand what you're doing today, where you're going to be able to get those fast wins, and what your migration plan is for the future. As we mentioned, right now, there's quite a few of you may have architectures that look like this. And this may be a simplification. Some of you may have some changes there. But oftentimes when we look at what the current landscape looks like, is you're going to need to have some of your staging, your ETL development. Maybe that's done in the EDW, maybe it's pushed into it. But then as soon as you want to start to get new insights, open up access to different types of departments, maybe have a little more of the analytic applications or self-service access, you start to get this proliferation of these data marts or data silos. And this means that your data is very segmented apart. It can be really hard to understand what the full picture of things are. And more importantly for all those end users, it can take them a long time to be able to get access to the data that they need, to be able to iterate at the speed of insight that they demand. And so where we see a modern data platform coming in is being able to consolidate the information from those different data marts and different silos, and being able to bring in all of the different and changing data sources and land them in these new modern data platforms to serve out a lot of those types of applications, to not only power any dashboards that you may have, provide a lot of the more iterative or exploratory analytics, even handle as some of this reporting in common with what you would do with a MicroStrategy. But also start to enable new use cases, being able to have that same shared data available not only to your analysts and your SQL developers, but to open up access to your data science team, to be able to start to develop and build predictive models and operationalize those very quickly. And then from this, of course, still being able to find that highly curated data that's going to power a lot of your fixed reporting handled by an enterprise data warehouse. And so one of the benefits of launching into these landscapes and the partnership that we have as well is being able to architect these new and changing landscapes while having the seamless reporting and being able to leverage the same tools and skill sets that your analysts already have today. The issue is, where do you start in all this? This is a great dream and vision for the future, but for a lot of you, when you think of an enterprise data warehouse, that's a black box. What tables are folks actually accessing? What are they doing? What are they running? How do you even start to parse apart not only the queries and what's being done in the system, but when you look at doing a migration, what which data sets should you migrate first? Which users should you bring over? Which reports? How do you actually start to break this apart in logical units so that, again, you can get those quick wins for your business? Not only are there millions of queries, thousands of users running against these systems, but how do you know that what they're doing is going to run seamlessly on the new platform, on Cloudera's platform, for example, or on Hadoop? And how do you start to prioritize where you want to dedicate your development resources to be able to make these run efficiently? So as I mentioned, this is something that Cloudera has been helping our customers through for quite a while. This is one of our most common use cases. And we'll go through an example of one of the bigger successes that we've seen with this as well. And from this, we've kind of laid out what our 4-step migration process is. And especially at a high level, none of this should be surprising to anyone here. But what's important and what we'll go into is this can be pretty challenging at a manual level. And so being able to leverage the right tools to get these insights efficiently can be very powerful, especially when you need to meet those prescriptive deadlines, especially when you need to understand how to allocate your development resources and drive the user adoption. You can't just move all the data over and then expect that everyone will jump in as well. And so what we'll go through is each of these bolded areas are actually areas where we have technology that can help you evaluate this and provide you greater insights as you work through this process. So of course, you want to begin with your evaluation. You want to understand what your goals are, lay them out clearly, and understand where to begin. What does usage look like today? How do you start to understand what a quick POC or quick win might look like? Plan out and look at the impact analysis of what you're doing. Where can you dedicate kind of the least effort to get the biggest result there? And then you begin with the offload process. So this is where you have to understand what changes are needed. Where might query syntax not be as compatible? And what sort of changes might need to be made. And then one of the things that we'll also go into is with Hadoop especially, it starts to look a lot more different than a very static traditional system. With iterative access, this means that things are changing a lot more. It's a different beast to have to optimize your data models for. So being able to stay on top of usage, to be able to better empower your end users, to be able to make them efficient and continue to drive new insights. So what Cloudera offers is a tool called Cloudera Navigator Optimizer. And what this does is it analyzes your SQL query logs to be able to get this insight to drive migration, to make you more efficient so that you understand what it takes to build out these new and changing data warehouse landscapes. So you want to begin by understanding what folks are doing. So being able to understand what are the top tables being accessed, the top columns, and then what's the long tail of data that maybe you don't need to move immediately. You can phase that in later. A lot of times, especially with folks running through BI and reporting tools, a lot of these queries tend to look very similar. So there may be a lot of query duplication where you can actually focus on those and catch most of the masses as well. And from this, you can start to piece apart where the tables that are going to matter and what users are doing. And with that, this is what feeds into your impact analysis. So being able to get a risk assessment and understand where do you actually want to start with all of this. So anything within the green chunk can be broken out into whatever your logical business unit there is, be it reports, different users, different departments. And those are going to be what your quick wins look like. Those are going to be the ones that are going to run the most cleanly right out of the gate. So maybe you want to start with those, prove that success to the business, and then continue on. And then with this, with any of the medium or higher risk alerts, you can understand actually what changes are going to need to be made to your queries or to your underlying data models as well to make them efficient. And then we go into the offload here. And so what you can do is then start to look at what these underlying queries are and understand where the syntax differences are. Understand what the offload requirements are going to be for bringing over any of this data, any of these users. Within the tool, it's actually going to provide you recommendations on where you may need to denormalize tables, maybe add in partitioning filters. So it's going to allow you to actually better understand the queries themselves at a very human scale and be able to make these changes reasonably for your business. And then finally, it's going to help you better optimize your reports, your BI within Hadoop. So this isn't a put it through once and then leave it alone. As I mentioned, this is a very iterative process. It is going to be a process as you go through these migrations, and even once you're active with Hadoop. So especially for any of your DBAs out there, being able to better understand what usage looks like after you open up access. How do you stay on top of this usage, better optimize data models, and be proactive about what you're providing to your business? And also be able to identify any maybe rogue actors or be able to provide recommendations for folks that aren't as used to the Hive or Impala interfaces as well. So one example that we wanted to provide, and this is one of the largest global payment processors and both a Cloudera and a MicroStrategy customer. So they really went through a very similar path here of what we discussed, was they were trying to run fraud analytics on their data, better understand buying behavior, better predict fraud. But their issue was with their traditional data warehouse, they had to limit the amount of data being stored and the time period in which it was stored. So they were only able to get about a year's worth of data there, which limited the visibility that their analysts had and limited the accuracy of their fraud reporting as well. In addition to this, they did not want to go through another upgrade cycle. So they were already spending over $1 billion on their warehouse, being able to keep that up and running. And so they couldn't justify increasing that cost just to continue doing what they were doing today. And so by creating this new modern data warehousing landscape, by bringing Cloudera into the mix and offloading a lot of the ETL, the exploratory analytics, and some of the BI and reporting capabilities, they now were able to store more and more data, be able to get a better historical view, be able to build out better fraud models. And from this, they were actually able to detect one of the largest incidences of fraud across the business, something that was happening very incrementally, month over month, so very hard to check and catch if you only have about 12 months of data there. So not only were they able to better power their fraud reports, get new insights there, but once you're not limiting the amount of data that can come in, once you can actually consolidate with other data sources as well, they were able to use that same transaction data to understand fraud to open up an entirely new revenue stream, to now provide merchant reports that they can sell back to, so that merchants can better understand what their buyers are doing, understand that buying behavior, better target from a marketing perspective, maybe an upsell perspective. And this became a new billion-dollar revenue business for this company as well. So, and with all this, as we've talked around before, and as many of you have heard, of course, these big data platforms can provide a more cost-effective solution. So this company in particular, able to save $30 million a year annually, being able to store at a 15th of the price per terabyte comparatively. But one of the more interesting things, at least I feel, is not only those cost savings, but you're not just saving and then doing what you're doing today. That's a harder motivation there. It's what can you do next? What are the other data sources that you could bring in? What are you missing today? What are the different groups that can come in and share that data and interact with it and be successful as well? And so with that, I will pass it back off to David.
Sounds good. So thanks, Alex. So whereas Alex started to describe the ability for us to optimize the underlying architecture, Now what I'm going to describe is how you would optimize your application in a way that is going to be resilient no matter how the data market changes. And so as a product manager, I'm responsible for going to different customers and understanding what are the challenges that they're trying to solve. And so I've been to a number of different customers on their big data journey, and there are a few typical scenarios that I'm going to highlight today. And the theme that I want to draw out from these scenarios is some of the benefits of using an enterprise-grade BI tool like a MicroStrategy. The first scenario that we can call is scoop and play. And this scenario represents customers trying to migrate all of their data from their enterprise data warehouse all the way over to Hadoop. This isn't necessarily the most popular, but it's top of mind and is especially beneficial to customers that have smaller and less complex data workloads. Typically, we find that this scenario is relevant with startup companies that are running through bake-offs or like a department that acts more or less like a startup underneath the umbrella of a larger enterprise company. And there are a number of challenges that come with the proliferation of all these new big data sources. So from an analytics perspective, this slide highlights the challenge that it can bring to develop an app. So using a data discovery tool that is known for quick insight might not give you the necessary flexibility and the back end that once the application is built out that has the ability to be resilient despite maybe some changes in some data sources. So it's hard to remap every time a new data connector comes out. Data discovery tools will require you to completely rebuild that product application. I see, Raghav, you're shaking your head. Yeah, that's right. And so this costs a lot of money and for any company that's going through this change. And so that's where I want to really highlight the value of using an object model, where you build it out once and you see the value no matter where the data goes. And so an object model or a business layer that sits on top of a company's physical warehouse would define the relationships between tables and give your end users the ability to have a very quick and easy drag and drop interface and access into data where they don't necessarily even need to know all the underlying things that are going on underneath the hood. And if you're a company that's already using an enterprise BI tool, pat yourself on the back because you're going to see some of these benefits. And if you're not a company that's using a tool like a MicroStrategy, maybe this conversation is going to start to highlight the value of that. And so this slide further talks about the benefits of a reusable object model. And so this time last year, I began working with a pharmaceutical healthcare company that had spent a lot of money developing several applications on top of a legacy data warehouse. But these would need to be remapped to a big data lake where all of their data was being transitioned over to. And by using MicroStrategy, they saved millions of dollars due to the fact that they were using our tool. And the benefit of using the object model is that you're going to only remap one object in your metadata layer or your data source level, and then you're off to the races. And another thing that we benefit from is that customers oftentimes, especially in a startup culture, often overlook the very important needs of data security. And that's something that definitely needs to be maintained. And that's something that MicroStrategy really closely integrates with, both at the data access level, but then at the user level as well. And so you go through that hurdle once with maybe some of your legacy applications, but you'll see the benefit in this rapidly changing marketplace. Another thing that I want to highlight very quickly about this, about our product, is that we have a tool that's called Integrity Manager. And this tool allows us to run SQL comparisons side by side between enterprise data warehouses and Hadoop data sources, or directly from Hadoop comparing to Hadoop. Not only the SQL, but also the actual data that's being brought back, or something that a lot of companies also like is the performance output. And so you can see kind of where Impala might add value versus where Hive or Spark SQL. And the last thing that I'll note about this tool is that this tool is very complementary to the tool and Navigator Optimizer that Cloudera and Alex had mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. So the second scenario we can call the hybrid model. And this is a typical approach that we see many customers working with today. Customers are augmenting their legacy systems in one of two ways. Either they're adding new types of data, sensor data, unstructured data, and they're adding the connection between their legacy data system with this new type of data. Or what we're seeing is a new level of data that is being accessed. And that is you're using your enterprise warehouse for some of the higher level reports, and then you get into your Hadoop distributions for the lower level reports. Companies that are able to quickly respond to these changes in the marketplace are going to definitely get some first mover advantages. This is not a foreign concept, this idea of now all of a sudden we're coming out and saying, oh, we can blend to new data sources. This is something that we've been working on for the last 15 years, and even in the marketplace, where we see that Salesforce was taking data and they were loading it into the cloud. And some of our customers that were able to blend the data from the cloud, that was their data that was being pushed over to Salesforce, with some of their legacy systems, were able to see some of those advantages. And so this is just a logical extension of the story that we've already told with that blending of data with Salesforce. So this is a slide that further highlights the data blending capabilities of MicroStrategy, where we can blend data from any type of source of data that you might be thinking of, between your traditional relational databases, SQL Server, Oracle, to now some of these newer types of data, either SQL on Hadoop or your NoSQL databases as well. And I want to highlight some of these customer examples that I've talked about that I've been exposed to over the last couple years. And so, for instance, an oil company down in Houston sees a lot of value in this. It costs over $1 million an hour for them to decide whether or not to drill in the Gulf Shore. And they not only want to visualize their Kafka logs so that they can see what's going on with some of their refineries, but they want to be able to blend that data with some of their historical reports so that they can then see, are they actually seeing an anomaly in the data or not. And then secondly, I went out to one of the largest retailers in Europe, where what they want to do is union the data from Hive that is aggregated at the day level with MongoDB, which is aggregated at the minute level. And so both data sources have different granularities of data. And if they were to report only on Hive, their data visualization would be delayed. And if they were to report only on MongoDB, well, they would probably crash their server because they would be loading too much data into a visualization. And so it's using a tool that can really respond to some of these bigger data challenges in a quick, seamless, transparent way that's going to be key. And so I talked about data blending with some of these newer types of data. Something else that I want to highlight is our ability to be aggregate aware, meaning we can understand, depending on the level of report that you are running, we're going to access different data sources. And so I want to highlight a demo with that. This is a quick 2-minute video that highlights, this is the MicroStrategy web interface. And we come into a report where we see that report at the year and category level. And now we want to drill into the quarter and category level. And so when we view the SQL that's being generated, we actually see that the quarter and category level report is hitting a intelligent cube. And this is our kind of in-memory data layer that we have that's very close, very responsive. And now what we want to do is drill a little bit lower. We want to go to what could be your enterprise data warehouse. We want to click through and click on the drill into the month level. So we see data at the category and the month level. And when we see the corresponding SQL with that, we see a different data source as well. And so this table is coming from the category, the aggregate table, which typically, as you all know, you store aggregate levels of data in your enterprise data warehouses. But now, what's newly possible is tapping into your Hadoop infrastructure. And so we want to drill even further to the subcategory and month level. And after doing that, we come in to look at the SQL that's generated. and we see a third and final data source that's being accessed, all in a way that's seamless and transparent to the users, where they still get to see that performance benefit. So the third and final scenario that I'll highlight is just the ability to fine-tune and optimize your performance with an application. And so something that I'm particularly excited about as a product manager is I was responsible for shipping what we call the Hadoop gateway. And this is something that I think differentiates MicroStrategy from a lot of BI tools in the marketplace, and that's that we have a native connection to Hadoop that no other BI tool has. And so what it is it's a Yarn application that we deploy to Hadoop, and as we deploy that Yarn application and we start that application off, and we generate and publish a cube with that data. We publish a cube with our application. What we see is parallel data transfer. And so why is this significant? Well, because many tools that we see in the marketplace that we're connecting to are taking advantage of parallel processing of data queries. But as soon as you start to take the data back into your application layer, you see what's called an ODBC bottleneck. And that is something that as you're transferring the data, it's got to go through a small ODBC connection, or let's say a JDBC connection, or even a WebSocket layer that is bottlenecked. And so the benefit of using the Hadoop gateway is actually we generate requests directly to the name node, which then subsequently generates requests to the data node. And then as the data node actually comes back with the corresponding data that you're looking for, it's the data node that transfers the data back to the intelligence server. So instead of using the ODBC driver, we're seeing a direct connection between our MicroStrategy intelligence server and the data nodes in your Hadoop cluster. And so we went, as another customer example, they were trying to publish a cube with that ODBC connection on Hadoop, and this was 500 million rows of data. That what they were trying to do was consolidate all of their viewership metrics from a lot of their common media channels. So YouTube, Xfinity, Hulu, and they're trying to publish a large amount of data because they know when they publish that into memory, they get quick and easy interactivity with these visualizations and these dashboards. And so that process was taking 6 hours with Hadoop. The same amount of data with 500 million rows of data was taking 2 hours with Teradata. So we went and we deployed the Hadoop gateway into their environment, published the cube in less than an hour. And so this was something that they really liked, especially because we were only using their dev environment. And their dev environment only had 2 data nodes. And their 2 data nodes did have 40 cores per data node and 380 gigabytes of RAM. But they were really excited because their prod environment had 51 data nodes. And so they were going to see a huge improvement on performance by using the Hadoop gateway to publish their cubes into memory. And so this is a very quick demo. I'm going to slide through this just for the sake of time. But I want you to see kind of a new visualization interface that we have that makes it super easy to connect to Hadoop. Everybody thinks, oh man, connection to Hadoop is going to be very complicated. But you see, you make a couple different connections. You identify your web HDFS port, a couple of the ports that you want to call your connection mode that you want to use, and you're off to the races. You can see the files that you want to browse, and then you go in and you can actually then view the underlying data. But then this is also key, is you can aggregate the data, you can filter the data, you can wrangle the data so that whatever's being brought back is curated. A lot of times you see data in the Hadoop layer that's a little bit not very clean. And so the fact that we can bring it back in a clean way is really exciting for a lot of people. And so the last thing that I'll mention about the Hadoop gateway is a lot of that data wrangling that I've talked about, we actually push down to the Hadoop cluster. And so that is something that a lot of customers like to see, where they're not relying on their application to do a lot of that wrangling process. This is a slide that further describes the data wrangling process that I have just mentioned. And then one of the final slides that I'll highlight is that our industry-best SQL engine is really known for our ability to, one, dynamically source. That is what I've talked about in the previous demo, where we understand at whatever level you're trying to execute a report, if you have data in memory, we're going to leverage that in-memory cube through dynamic sourcing. And then we also have paired up with a lot of customers like Alex and Cloudera, where we push down a lot of the functionality. So we're not the ones necessarily always responsible for all these new optimizations on the SQL side, but we're pushing down that functionality to the relevant players in the marketplace. And then the last thing that I'll say is that we're already seeing customers that are very successful, that are seeing great performance improvements with across many different industries, from cube loading to execution of specific reports. And so now it's up to you all to decide what flavor do you want to tap into, and where do you want to go with the next steps of this exciting new stage of big data. And with that, I want to open it up for any questions, but I also want to respect your time and dismiss anybody that wants to go off to lunch. I want to also point out that we are at booth 337, so please stop by our booth, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you all have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely. So we're working with some of the largest customers that are trying to publish cubes. Like every day publishes 100 gigabytes. A cube that is 100 gigabytes. It's not 10 cubes that are 10 gigabytes apiece. It's one cube and multiple cubes that are each 100 gigabytes of data. That's right. So it really depends on, it's not just the amount of rows that you see, but also the columns. And so we, I think, had 38 columns by 500 million rows. And that, I think, came out to 40 gigabytes. So I know that was not necessarily pushing. So there's definitely a ton of optimizations that can come with any type of ODBC connection or JDBC connection, where you set up different partitions along your connection. So those can actually be pretty fast, but the Hadoop gateway and the Hadoop clusters are already set up for that kind of partitioning, and so we're seeing some really strong performance from those. And another thing that I would point out is that the Hadoop gateway is leveraging a very cost-effective solution, and that's your Hadoop cluster. So definitely can look into some of these more expensive players to get that parallel data transfer, but then you're going to be taking some cost there as well.
Yeah, and so what we usually see is you actually, you wouldn't want to partition across systems, because then whenever you want to query against it, you're moving the data to go and query it. So you should actually, that's when we start to look at what are kind of the logical units that you want to bring over, be it a full set of report, maybe it's a group of users, and then start to see, okay, which are the types of workloads that you want to bring over versus just having partitioning split across them.
And then from the application side, you can use either you could use multiple data sources on the same application. So you could kind of get that multi-level report very seamlessly, bring back your historical report, bring back the lower level report, and then link that data set through the Visual Insight. You're a MicroStrategy guy. I want it to be a little bit more vague, but
I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
The web tool.
Cool. Any other questions? And then future.
What versions of Cloudera is that compatible?
So I've worked with many different types of Cloudera, between I think as late as 5.7.5, and then 5.8.3, 5.9.1, 5.10, and 5.12 are the most common tools that we've seen, like when I've gone on site to validate. But
yeah, and so MicroStrategy, we certify with them for every of our quarterly release cycles there. I'm not in particular familiar with what release one the Hadoop gateway would work on, but whenever they would have a new version, they would go through our certification process, but they're pretty up to date with our release cycle as well.
On top of the Hadoop gateway, we also connect via Hive, Spark SQL,
Yeah.
Impala, to really many versions of CDH. So what would be necessary is mapping those the attributes that you're importing back to project attributes. So you've already gone through and defined those relationships, and then it's the MTDI interface that you're publishing the cube, and you can go through that process of mapping those attributes back, where you can take advantage of those relationships.
Thank you all for attending.
Mm-hmm.